Hello, Misfit entrepreneurs. This is Dave Lukas, and welcome to another episode of the Misfit Entrepreneur, where it is our job to help you unleash your inner misfit and break through to higher levels of success, wealth, and fulfillment by bringing you the best insight and information from the world's top entrepreneurs, with a specific focus on their misfit side, the specific traits, habits, and secrets that have allowed them to thrive and succeed. As a reminder, if you're new to watching us on our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button below. Give this video a like and comment as well. We do our best to respond to all comments as timely as possible. This week's Misfit Entrepreneur is Jhana Li. Jhana is the founder of Spyglass Ops, a firm with a special focus on operations to scale small and mid-sized businesses. She ran her first company while living out of a van traveling through North and South America, and she has consulted with over 47 and 8-figure businesses and has coached over 500 founders on how to scale their operations and grow. One of the biggest hurdles in building a great business is going through the challenge of building scalable operating systems and processes. But if you can get this right, your business can grow exponentially. And I couldn't think of a better expert to give us the playbook to do so than Jhana. So let's jump in. Jhana, are you ready to unleash your inner misfit?
Yes, I am, Dave. I am so excited to be here. Let's dive in.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you. And you've had a really cool story, right? So, you've been the operations manager and head of ops in companies. You've now gone on your own. You can travel. Like we were just talking, you're going to Spain, you're going all over the place, and you can work from wherever you're at and everything. So take 5 minutes or so and just give us your story. How did you get to where you're at?
Yeah. So for me, I always say that before I found operations, I was literally directionless, right? I was living in this van. I was traveling all through North and South America. I had a boyfriend at the time who was scaling a digital marketing agency. And personally, I had no idea what I was doing. Like I was working an odd series of remote jobs. What I did know was that I wanted to create a life by my own design. I had broken with the idea that my life had to look a particular way. I had to follow a particular definition of success in a particular career path. And so when this opportunity to, do something crazy, like move into a van and go to South America presented itself to me, I was in. But career side, had no idea how that was going to actualize for me. And through a series of odd events, after a couple of years of seeing this ex-boyfriend now building this marketing agency, I stepped into his team for what was going to be just a 30-day fill in a gap for somebody who had left, and ultimately became that company's COO. And to be clear, Dave, I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea what operations even was. I just stepped into the company. I started seeing problems and I started fixing those problems intuitively as best as I could. And eventually I learned that there's a word for that and there's a skill for that. And there's a whole set of skills and tools around that. And so that really is what set me down the path of operations. And then when I had the opportunity to coach in a community that had hundreds of owners and founders in it, that was really the unlock for me, because now instead of having only data from one business, I had data from hundreds, and I could understand what were the consistent pain points, bottlenecks, pitfalls that broke businesses and stalled businesses out. And then what were the actual best practices and patterns that allowed for somebody to be successful? And so over years and many hundreds of businesses studied, I took all of that data, I turned it into my own operations methodology. And that's what we now help our clients with.
Nice. So I've got a number of questions around this topic that I want to hit into today. We'll probably dance around a little bit and come back to things. But the first thing, just out of the gate, what's the number one thing entrepreneurs get wrong when they're trying to scale their operations in their business?
The number one thing that entrepreneurs get wrong when scaling the operations of their business is that they assume the job of, if they have an operator, they assume that the job of operations is SOPs, systems, tools, meetings, right? I am the founder. I don't want to be doing all of these things. So I just give them to somebody else, and then their job is to do all these things. I don't want to be managing all the team questions. So I just give it to my operator, and now they get to manage all the team questions, right? They treat the operator as, in some ways correctly, like a second in command, but they erroneously assume that this operator's job is just to do what I was doing, and now it's just somebody else doing it. Versus operations is much closer to a yin to a visionary yang, right? It is an opposite skill set. It is an opposite lens. And the real value of operations is when that lens gets unlocked within the business. So let me give you a tactical example, Dave. When I stepped into that very first marketing agency, I did a quick audit of their billing system. And I found that due to, they were shifting merchant processors, XYZ thing, they were losing over $50,000 a month. My CEO had no idea, had no clue that that gap was even there because it wasn't his lens on the business. He wasn't focused on where are like the couple of clients that are missing payments and are late on payments and are pausing too much, right? That wasn't what he was focused on. He was focused on what's the next product we can launch? What's the next offer we can create? What's the next revenue pillar we can build? And so the yin and the yang of the visionary and the operator isn't just two leaders doing the same thing and splitting the load. It's one person, the visionary, driving growth, innovation, vision, and ideas into the company. And then it is the operator actualizing on those ideas and making them as efficient as possible, finding the leaks, finding the holes, finding the gaps, and closing them. And so if you treat your operator like they're just there to build a couple of systems, some SOPs, and answer team questions, that's all you're ever going to get. Versus if you ask your operator, your unique lens is to turn this into as efficient of a machine as possible. Go do that and tell me what you find out. You will get way more value out of that person.
Yeah, it's empowering people to, figure out the best ways to do things and allowing them to do so. As a business owner, it's one of the hardest things to let go. But in order to scale operations and scale a business, you have to let go. In fact, your goal should be to get to where the business doesn't need you anymore at all, right? That's the ultimate freedom of building a business if you do it right. So with that context in mind, when you coach a business owner or an entrepreneur, where's the first place that you start with them and why?
Yeah. Every business is unique, and that's because every founder is unique and their goals for their business are unique. So we start if we're working with a new client, our first step is to do a company-wide audit. So I actually have a team that I've trained to come into their business to spend a week looking around their company, auditing systems, interviewing people, the whole nine. And then we produce a report that helps our client understand these are the operational bottlenecks that are holding you back and are the reason that you're not where you want to be in terms of scalability, growth, freedom, whatever that metric is. You told us that you want to be at point B in 12 months. You want to 2x your revenue, or you want to be working 4-hour working weeks, right? Whatever that goal is, cool. Well, here's the bottlenecks that you need to clear first. And then here's a step-by-step 12-month roadmap to help get you to where you want to go. The reason we start there, Dave, is because I don't believe that there's a quote unquote right way to build a business. This is what I love about your podcast and this whole concept of a misfit. We're all misfits. And so we don't take a one-size-fits-all approach because I don't believe that that's real and I don't believe it applies. Yeah, totally. We're all weird, which means that we get to build weird businesses and we get to build businesses that help us achieve our weird and unique goals. And so we start by building that roadmap with the client so that we're all on the same page about what it's going to take to get them where they want to go.
Okay. So with that being said, and understand that all businesses are different and they have their own unique characteristics and things about them and stuff. I am curious though, if you were developing a playbook that could be used to build and scale operations for, let's say, the majority of companies, like what would that look like? What are the key elements of scalable business system? And I guess, how can small businesses implement those elements effectively, from the start?
Totally. So we actually do have this playbook. We just put the finishing touches on it. But essentially every business we audit and analyze through 6 core pillars. I think that these are the 6 foundational pillars that make up a business's ability to scale and scale well. Any one of these things missing, and you're going to have a really tough time of it. So those 6 pillars are strategy, leadership, team, systems, communication, and data. These are the 6, operationally speaking, these are the 6 things that it takes to make a business successful. And so even while we are building fully custom roadmaps, we're doing it by analyzing every single business against and within these 6 pillars. How is your data? How are your systems? How is your leadership? And if there's a gap between where you're at and where you need to be to achieve your goals, that's what we're going to hold up the mirror and call out so that we can now work together to close that gap.
So take us through those 6 pillars one by one and just give like
Yep.
one action
Yep.
item that, let's say that you're talking to somebody who really hasn't spent much time operationally. They, maybe don't even document
Sure.
processes. They're just, they're making it work, right? Which a lot of entrepreneurs, at
Yes.
least smaller or startup entrepreneurs, do, right? So take us through each one and like, what's one action item that can be done under the pillar?
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so number one is strategy. And the way I always describe this is like, no one can run a race if you don't tell them where the finish line is. And right now you're asking yourself and your team to run a race, and you're getting frustrated if they're not running as fast as you, or they're running alongside you, or they're not running, like they're not motivated to run in the same direction you are. Well, have you given them direction to run in? And so my one actionable step around strategy would be, are you as a founder carving out regular time on your own calendar to not be in the weeds, to not be answering client fires, to not be doing any of the day to day, to truly step out and step back and take a strategic view of your business? Do you know where you are going? Do you know how you want to get there? And then have you communicated that to your team repeatedly? So that would be strategy. Good on that one, Dave?
Yep.
Cool. As soon as strategy is in place, that immediately moves us into leadership. Well, actually, I should say into team, right? So we've now taken our strategy, we've given it to our team. Our team now has a finish line. So how do we get them motivated to run towards it with us? There's a whole checklist. People can reach out to me if they want it, of like 8 key things that your A-playing team needs in order to succeed in their role. But I would say if there was one actionable that I could give to the members of your audience on the team subject, it would be, now that you've presented a strategic vision to your team, sitting down with them one-on-one and helping them understand, here is how your role directly contributes to this strategic vision. Here's how we measure that. Here's what success looks like for you, right? Because I've talked about what success looks like for the business, but what does success look like for you? So individualizing the finish line so that they not only stand, where am I going, but how am I uniquely responsible for getting the company there? That will immediately unlock proactive action, motivation, innovation, creativity, because again, you're giving them a finish line to run towards. So that would be team. That whole thing is an act of leadership. And so leadership is the third core pillar. When we're small, the only leadership is us, right? As we scale and as we grow, what you talked about, Dave, of having this really a business that can run with or without you, ultimately that comes down to a leadership team. And so the goal, if you're seeking to scale your business towards 8 figures, or you're seeking a business that can create true freedom for you, is to have a leadership team that can run the day-to-day and make day-to-day decisions for you. The number one actionable that I would give people around leadership is to think very carefully before internally promoting their top performer. This is the biggest mistake that I see when it comes to building leadership teams. I have an amazing salesperson. I want a head of sales. So I'm going to take my most amazing salesperson and I'm going to put them in that role. That makes perfect sense, right? Unfortunately, what happens is that you've now taken that person who's really good at like one thing and one thing only, picking up the phone and closing clients. And you've now taken their time away from doing that and towards team trainings, leadership huddles, administrative tasks, data tracking, all these things that are not actually what they're uniquely gifted at. So I'm all for, let me be clear, Dave, I'm all for internal promotion, but I would only promote somebody if they are going to be a better manager and leader of people than they are a performer in the role. Otherwise, keep them in their zone of genius. That's where they're going to achieve the most growth, the most fulfillment, and ultimately you won't end up with a leadership team of angry top performers who no longer get to do what they do. Okay. So that's strategy, team, leadership. Next one is communication. The biggest mistake that I see made with communication is that founders will over rely on manual communication when that communication instead should be automated. So let me give you a tactical example of this. When we go in and we audit a client's businesses, most times we will see our founders spending anywhere between like 4 to 6 hours a day in meetings and in Slack, right? They're literally just talking all day, every day. They are talking. Their team is talking. Everyone's talking. And unfortunately, talking is one of the most expensive, costly things that you and your team can do. Time spent talking is not only time that you are paying for, but it is time not spent doing your job, generating revenue, closing clients, upselling clients, right? Doing the things that actually grow the business. So it's a double whammy. And so I see founders be really kind of laissez-faire with their talking of like, oh, we'll just have another meeting. Oh, I'll just follow up with them on Slack. Oh, we'll just spend hours and hours every day talking to each other. That is so expensive. It's so expensive. And the solution isn't to just talk less, right? Like magically, I'm just not going to talk to you. People still need to talk. It's automating that communication, which is what brings us into systems. Systems is pillar number 5. The best systems automate communication. They take all of that chatter and they build it into a system where it says, instead of asking you, hey, Dave, where are we at with that task? I can just assign you a task, or I can check the update on that task and see where you're at with that task. Instead of saying, hey, what is the address for this client? I can just go to a system. I can go to a dashboard and I can find the address for the client, right? So the best systems minimize communication. And then the very last pillar, and then we'll interrupt me, please, Dave. Pillar number 6 is data.
No, it's good. I'm just letting you go. We'll talk about it as we finish here.
Okay, perfect. So data is pillar number 6 because it also arrives last. If you are doing 50K a month or less in your business, I wouldn't worry or focus on data. But as you get above 50K per month, 100K per month, and into the 300 to 500K per month range, that is when data becomes absolutely essential. Because what happens as you scale is that you as a founder start stepping back from the day-to-day. You start stepping back from the front line. You're just no longer involved. I'm not talking to that client. My account manager is talking to that client. So I don't know if that client is happy or not. I don't know if that client is about to leave. I don't have any visibility into the front line of my business anymore. That is not only really dangerous when it comes to still trying to make the best decisions on behalf of your company, it's also just scary as hell. It feels like walking next to a cliff edge with a blindfold on. And so data is your way of taking the blindfold off so that you can still know what's happening without being personally buried in it. And that is totally essential for a founder who truly wants to empower their team, elevate out of the day-to-day weeds, and still make the best decisions that guide their company forward.
Yeah. All right. So, obviously I'd let you go because that's fantastic. And I think anybody listening or watching, go back through that segment and just take notes as you go through, because she just gave you literally the playbook of things. Now, it's easier said than done, right? So
of course,
knowledge, knowledge is good, but it takes action, right, to actually make it go. And I think one of the things, probably the biggest takeaway too, is the things that you're describing are the things that most business owners and people want to do the least, right? Nobody wants to sit around documenting processes. Nobody wants to sit around figuring out how to set up the systems to give you the data and that type of stuff. But it's the most important things. And the sooner that you can do it in your business, the better off you will be, because there will come a time where you'll be forced to do it. And that's no fun either.
Well, and let me offer a permission slip there, Dave, which is that most founders assume this needs to happen, therefore I must do it. Our business operates off of a fundamentally different assumption, which is that you actually are not the best person to do this in your business. There's this whole other group of people out in the world who love, like genuinely love. And I know because I coach them every day. They love systems. They love data. They love SOPs. They can't wait to get in there and build that for you. So why would you waste your time and energy to learn a thing that you hate, to only be mediocre at it, when instead you could get all of that time and energy back to do what you love, grows and moves the needle on the business, and then delegate everything that you don't love to a person who genuinely wants to do it? To me, that feels like a much better arrangement.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I've been through it and stuff, and I'm one of the ones that doesn't like to do that, but I've forced myself to do it at times. And when you're resource constrained or even money constrained, like startups and stuff, then you kind of have to. But if you do it right, it'll start to free up time, and you can bring that person in. In fact, that's a great point on. I want to dig in more on like the systems on a daily, weekly, monthly basis and stuff with you. All right, so Jhana, what are the daily, weekly, like monthly type systems? And there's, I get it. This is a big question. It's kind of loaded, right? So maybe just give us examples for each one. So like daily, weekly, monthly systems that a business really should have in place to grow and scale.
Okay. So I think it starts at the daily and then we'll build our way up. Day
Right.
to day, the number one system, if there was one thing, one system to build, I call that system the single source of truth. And it's essentially a project management system. So softwares that you can use for this are softwares like ClickUp or Asana or Monday.com. There's a ton of options out there. They all work, by the way, Dave. There's not a best one, but it's using that system to run the 80/20 of your day to day execution, meaning all of your tasks move through that system. All of your meeting agendas are housed in that system. All of your SOPs get recorded and are organized in that system, right? The system contains all the information and all the activity of the business. That one system forms the heartbeat of the day to day. It's what allows the day to day to go as quickly, efficiently, effectively as possible. It's what allows founders to cut their slack time from 6 hours down to 1 hour. It's that one system. That's the day to day. What you layer in on top of that then are meetings and data. So I would say at the weekly level, that's when we're having meetings, right? We're using that system to understand what's coming up for us this week, what's the highest priority, what are the action items this week. And on a weekly basis, each department in the business ideally is meeting and talking about what's highest priority, what are we going to execute, and do I need to clear any blockers in order for me to be able to successfully execute. So that's kind of your weekly rhythm. And again, that's a departmental huddle plus a leadership huddle if you have a leadership team. On a monthly basis is when we're asking strategic questions. And this is where the data comes in. So how did we do last month? What does that tell us? Like using that as a diagnostic tool, what does that tell us about where there are gaps that need to be closed or opportunities that need to be doubled down on? And on a monthly basis, again, meeting with your leadership team. And if you don't have a leadership team, like I said, carving out time for yourself to have that meeting, to look at the data and to ask yourself those questions. Where are the gaps? Where are the gains? And where are we going in the next 30 days? And then on a quarterly basis, that's pure strategic, right? So at a monthly level, you're still like, okay, in the next 30 days, we want to execute and achieve these tactical deliverables.
Right.
On a quarterly basis, you're talking about where is this business going to be 90 days from now? What targets will we have hit? What metrics will we have moved the needle on? I don't even freaking know how we're going to do that yet, but I know that this is the direction I want to move the business. And now I can turn around, give that to my team, and we can co-create a game plan on how to get there. And then that's what brings it back down into the monthly and into the weekly. Does that answer your question, Dave?
Yeah, it does. I'm a fan of the EOS system. I've used it in a number of businesses and everything else. And some of this sounds like EOS, but it's also common sense things to do. Do you utilize those type of models, or do you use other models and stuff that you work with businesses on?
Yeah. So because I specialize in working with one type of business, which is this like online based startup, I have studied all of the methodologies. I have cherry picked what I like out of each of those methodologies. And then I've combined it all into kind of my own methodology that is specifically tailored for digital startups. Because I think EOS has some brilliant and amazing parts to it. Right. It was also developed like 30 years ago, pre-internet and pre-COVID and pre the whole new reality that we exist in. And so in some ways, it's rock solid and it continues to be true. In other ways, business owners just face a new reality. And so taking the best practices where they exist, everywhere that they exist, and putting them to work for the modern business owner, that's kind of what I do.
Well, speaking to that's a great segue, because I was going to ask you to like give an example of like a small business you've worked with that really successfully scaled its operations, kind of using your methods, and like what were their big challenges? What did they have to overcome, and how did they do it?
Yeah, great question. So I'll give you an example of a client that I just touched base with. We started working together last year. And when we first started working together, I'll paint a picture for you, Dave. He's a brilliant entrepreneur, incredibly driven, incredibly hardworking, and he was absolutely buried. He was buried in every single component of his business. He was the marketing team, and he was the salesperson, and he was the customer success representative, and he was doing 7 figures, and he had pretty much just like brute forced his way, sheer willpowered his way to 7 figures in revenue. And when we did our initial analysis, we built a game plan with him in order for him to systematically take each of those day-to-day hats off of his head, give them to his very capable team. Like he had a team. They wanted to do well. They wanted to take those hats off, but he didn't know how to give it to them in a way that he could trust. And so we built that game plan. We worked with him over the successive months to take those hats off of his head one by one, empower his team, train up his team, build the right systems around his team so they could do not as good of a job, but an even better job in their role than he was doing it when he felt it. And eventually, like when I checked back in with him most recently, he said that the biggest transformation for him is that he got to start, the way he described it is, I got to start living in the future. I was able to delegate and hand off the present day. I was out of it. My team had it. So I got to spend all of my time being a visionary and looking into the future and seeing what was coming and seeing where the big opportunities were and steering the ship in that direction, which is ultimately all that he wanted for himself. He now has a new pair of twins. So like he's busy, you know, like he has a family to care for and be with, and he's able to do that while still driving his business because his team has the day-to-day handled.
No, that's a great example. You mentioned earlier, like some systems, technology, and that sort of thing. And some of those I've even used, HubSpot, Salesforce. There's these different things out there. Like, so talk about the role technology plays in really building scalable systems. What are some of those essential tools or platforms that you recommend businesses have as part of doing this right?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like to think of systems as the skeleton of a body, right? They are the thing that holds up the body, that allows the body to move and to coordinate, like one hand doing this while the other hand does this, right? They allow the body to orchestrate and coordinate movement. Trying to run a body without a skeleton would be pretty freaking difficult, which is why trying to run a business without systems is pretty hard. And so in terms of what those core skeletal pieces are, a couple of categories. Number one is a CRM, a sales CRM. So a dedicated software that exists and lives on the front end of your business for marketing and sales to track and manage leads. That's it, right? Who are the leads we're talking to? Get them into the sales process, track them through the sales process, and then close them. That is one software. And there are specific softwares like the ones that you called out, Dave, Salesforce, HubSpot. Those are big enterprise level solutions. There are much cheaper and smaller solutions built for startups specifically, if that's the system that you want. Probably the biggest one in the space is called Go High Level. So that's a sales CRM. That's absolutely key. The second system, like I already mentioned on the back end, is the single source of truth. So if you've got the sales CRM on the front end and the single source of the truth on the back end, honestly, you're doing pretty good. Like those are the core systems that you need in place. If your team is using them, they use them every day, they're using them correctly, those two systems will take you very, very far.
Have you experimented much with ChatGPT and using it to help with like creating processes, things like that? Any hacks or prompts that you've created that you think people can use to help them, not necessarily start from the ground up, but get a leg up on things?
Sure. I have, and I would say that even more than like ChatGPT, there's a wonderful resource, Dave, that maybe you could drop in the show notes called "There's an AI for That." And it's just a running library of all of the AI tools out there. So let me give you an example in operations. Something operators have to do all the time is build and update SOPs. I could go to ChatGPT and try and teach it what an SOP is and how to structure one and how I want it structured and all of these things. Or there's an AI tool called Scribe How, which is specifically built for SOPs. And you just do the process, you record your screen as you're doing it, and the AI will take that and automatically reformat that and turn that into a SOP, right? So I think I'm a huge advocate for helping, like using AI tools to help your team become more effective and supercharge them in their role. But AI is such that like what they need in their role is probably highly specific. And so if they can find an AI tool that matches their specific needs, that's where you're going to get most bang for buck.
So that's a great example, and that's a great resource. We will link to that so people can find it in the show notes. I want to shift gears a little bit and just talk a little bit about your entrepreneur journey because we're getting close to the end of our time.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about like, what are the biggest lessons that you've learned as you've built your own business? What are some of the key things that you feel it's important for entrepreneurs to know?
I think the biggest lesson that I have learned, and that I will add, I continue to learn every day, is that my business will only grow as fast as I do. And if I want my business to grow, then that means I need to undergo constant, relentless personal development and level up. And I've really taken this methodology to heart now, Dave, to the point that I really just perceive my business as essentially a mirror. It's just the world's harshest mirror being held up to my face every single day, telling me where I need to grow next, where that identity no longer serves, where that belief has to be unlearned and rewritten. Like every single day, the things that go well in my business point me in the right direction, and the things that don't go well tell me where I need to grow. And it's a super exhausting way to run your business. I will be honest about that. Like it is hard sometimes, but I would have it no other way because I'm a very growth oriented individual. And if I use my business as a vehicle for growth, I think it's also the most efficient and effective personal development tool out there. And so really over the last 3 years of running this company, the biggest thing that has changed is me.
What's something you wish you knew sooner as an entrepreneur?
I wish I knew what I was uniquely good at. I think entrepreneurs are so hardworking and generally quite talented. And so we're able to do a lot of things well enough. And that is amazing to start when you can't afford a team. And so you have to do everything. And so you do everything well enough, right? Like that is what makes an entrepreneur successful when they start. But what helps entrepreneurs scale, and for the people who really break through, they break through to the 8 figures and the 9 figures. They don't do it by working harder. They actually do it by doing less. They do it by only doing the thing that they are uniquely talented at. And so I have done a lot of personal exploration and development on this topic more recently. And I wish I'd done it earlier because I would have built my business in a different way. I would have built my business in such a way that allowed me to step into my zone of genius as quickly as possible versus trying to show up and do it all and be it all and wear all the hats, frankly, for way too long.
So the offshoot to that then becomes, well, how do you figure that out? How do you figure out what your zone of genius is? What have you learned about that?
So I think the first thing is that it is a process, right? It's an ongoing and constant process of personal discovery. And so I highly recommend creating a support network around yourself to do the work. So that could look like a therapist. That could look like a coach. That could look like a pile of books that you're committed to going through. And there are many books on this topic that are excellent, right? 2 that come to mind, 10X is easier than 2X and The Great Leap. These are 2 great books to get started on this topic with. But it's hard. It takes consistency. And so I'd recommend putting a supporting infrastructure around yourself so that you can show up and do that work over the course of months, because that's how long it's going to take.
Yeah, that's a great point. Those 2 books are great resources too. Thanks for highlighting those. Is there anything around operations that we haven't covered yet that we should have before we get to your Misfit 3? Anything we missed?
I think we did a very good high-level overview, Dave. It would be quite impossible for me to share everything that I think is essential and important around operations. So hopefully we've just communicated one thing, which is that operations is not just systems and SOPs. It's actually the greatest growth hack to freedom, to scale, and to highest levels of impact. And if it's important enough to do all of those things, that it's an important enough topic to invest in, to learn more about, to bring an operator into your team so they can bring that into your business, and to put time and energy and money towards it. Because otherwise, I promise, like operations just isn't sexy. It will be the last thing on your list. It is the lowest priority if we're only thinking about it as, well, SOPs, I'll get to that later.
Okay, it's time for Jhana's Misfit 3. These are the 3 things that she wants you to take that you can put in your life, your business, make a difference for yourself starting today. And the way that I always frame this to every guest that comes on the show is I say, hey, look, if you were going to leave this earth tomorrow and you could only leave behind your 3 best pieces of wisdom to the generations that come after you to help them live their best life, what would those 3 things be? So, Jhana, what are your Misfit 3?
Amazing. So the first one is a quote that absolutely changed my life and changed my whole leadership style. This quote is, "We are not the highest version of ourselves that we can imagine. We are the lowest version of ourselves that we can accept." And very simply, what this means is that if you want to make any change in your life or in the lives of your team or in the performance of your team, it doesn't come from dreaming bigger dreams and having higher aspirations for them. It comes from raising the bar and raising the minimum acceptable standard that you tolerate, because you will get what you tolerate. So we are not the highest version of ourselves that we can imagine. We're the lowest version of ourselves that we can accept. That quote very dramatically changed my life. I would say second, again, I can only quote more brilliant people than me, but objects in motion stay in motion. Objects at rest stay at rest. And as that applies to my life as an entrepreneur and as a person in this world, I have found it to be so true. And one of the things that I'm always actively aware of is momentum and momentum management, because objects in motion stay in motion. And at the end of the day, entrepreneurship and quote unquote winning in that game is just about staying in the game. It's about being able to continue to show up day after day after day and just keep playing no matter what happens. And so anything that we can do to manage and support our own momentum, which very importantly, Dave, I think also means taking a step away from the business, resting,
right,
going on that trip, spending time with your family, it's all in service to your ability to sustainably play the game. And I wish less entrepreneurs put the hustle and grind above all else on a pedestal and understood that that only gets you so far. And if you really want to make a life and a career out of entrepreneurship, it requires what I call, and this would probably be my number 3, work-life harmony. I don't believe in work-life balance. I think balance means that these are opposite ends of a spectrum and that you need to take away from one in order to get more from the other. And I don't believe that. I would much rather create work-life harmony, where I have intentionally and critically designed both my life and my work so that they are just two equal expressions of myself. And by showing up and doing my best work, I am living my richest possible life. And by, hopping off this call and going on a whitewater rafting trip, which is what I'm going to do, I am doing my best work because I'm recharging myself so that I can come back to the game and continue to play it with a whole heart and whole energy and full spirit. So yeah, I guess those would be my 3.
That's awesome. And I love that last one. We talk about that so many times on the show about finding harmony versus balance. So really great point. If people do want to learn more about you, where should they go?
Yeah. So the best place, and I'll make sure that you have this link, Dave, is my link tree. You're going to be able to follow me on the social media channel of your choice, as well as get access to that big picture guide, that operational playbook that we spoke about at the beginning of the episode. You can find it right in there.
Perfect. Yeah, and we'll link to that in the show notes, the best show notes in the business, for reasons I will talk about more in a second. But first, for those of you that are new to the Misfit Entrepreneur, it's your first episode with us, welcome. It is such an honor to have you with us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And for those of you that are with us week in and week out, I cannot thank you enough for your support of the show. You are what makes this go in over 100 countries every single week. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And make sure and go out and check out those show notes for the episode. They are the best in the business. Why? Because I do them myself. As part of my personal growth routines and my habits, I go back through these episodes with amazing guests like Jhana, and I take my best pieces of wisdom, tips, actions and habits and things, and I share those with you. So check those out. And then go out and give this episode a rating and review. Like and comment on it. Help share Jhana's message, because we all know, and I say this in every episode, one great episode can change someone's life. Maybe something that Jhana shared today was that missing link you were looking for to get to your next level. So share this with others. And again, Jhana, thank you so much for coming on, sharing all your wisdom and insight today.
Absolutely. So happy to. Thank you for having me.